there are periods of your life where you kind of have to tap into this hustle mindset. What's happened though is that it's just become the norm. And like for me, like I didn't really know any other way of living besides always being the best at what I was doing. Now, I'm not a perfectionist, right? There's a distinction there, but there was this like unreasonable standard that I was trying to meet. And it just kind of gets baked into your DNA. It gets baked into like your worldview, your values, all of those things. And you start seeing rest as something that is lazy. There's like a moralistic judgment there. You start seeing rest as something you don't deserve.
Israa, welcome to the show. I am super excited to have you here to talk about a topic that I think a lot of people don't realize, like how ingrained it might be in how you operate with all things career, relationships, and yes, money. We're talking about toxic productivity today, and you have written an entire book about it. So first and foremost, welcome to Yo Quiero Dinero. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about our conversation because I think that we'll touch on stuff that I think lots of people struggle with, including myself, but we don't really talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for folks who are encountering you for the first time, just give us a little bit of background, who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into the work that you have created with this book.
I'm a therapist by training. I've been a therapist for about 10-ish years and, worked in a variety of settings, including private practice, community mental health. And one of the things I realized while working was that people should have access to information that can be preventative mental health care. But a lot of times, simple, basic things like emotional regulation, you only learn in therapy. So for that reason, I started sharing mental health education content on social media, long form writing like Substack, as an effort to give that information to people so that they can have preventative mental health care instead of reactive mental health care. So I do that, besides being a therapist, which is just sharing information online so that people have that information.
Yeah. So, what inspired you to write this book? So, the full title is Toxic Productivity: Reclaim Your Time and Emotional Energy in a World That Always Demands More. And you can get it at your favorite bookstore. What inspired you to write this book, and what personal experiences helped you start to understand that toxic productivity is even a thing?
I had never actually heard the phrase before, but I definitely was experiencing something that felt different. This is a couple of years ago in my early 30s. I felt like a strange sense of dissatisfaction with my life, even though I did everything that you're supposed to do, quotes, to be happy, right? And on the outside, people were saying things like, wow, you're doing so well. Like you just moved to New York, you have a job in tech, you work, blah, 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 right? Like you do all the things and people think that you're supposed to be happy. So they tell you that. But internally, like I did not feel that. And so I started doing a little bit of digging into life satisfaction. I started reading existential philosophers and things like that. I talked to my doctor. I did a depression screening, but it didn't come out as depression. So I knew that there was something going on in the way I was living my life. And that reading, that research eventually became the foundation for the book. So it
Huh.
started off as a way for me to make habit changes, for me to recognize what emotion is driving me to feel bad about myself. What is the emotion that's driving me to feel like I'm not good enough, that I'm behind, that other people are living better than me? And so that's really where this came from. But the deeper I dug into it, pulling out my old journals from when I was in my early 20s and my high school years, I realized that this was like the foundation to feel this way was set a really long.
Hmm. Yeah, let's dive into that because when I talk to the listeners of this show, many of whom are from communities of color, first generation, and kind of the ones that are the pioneers in their family that are set out to pursue the quote American dream, I find that there is a lot of toxic productivity kind of inherent into how many of us are operating. This sense of dread that if you slow down, if you take breaks, if you stop that constant just accumulation of achievements and accolades and money and success that everything is going to fall apart. And so I found, and even in my own experience, that a lot of that pressure comes from what I saw growing up, this environment where, coming from parents who have an immigrant experience, there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of both spoken and unspoken expectations that I think can play into this. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
That's absolutely correct. I think your lived experiences interact with this framework of toxic productivity and can amplify certain things. So the immigrant community definitely feels it in a different way. Not to say that you can't feel it if you don't belong to an immigrant community, but for me, like that's where it came from. My parents are immigrants. I myself am an immigrant. You know, besides being a child of immigrants, so it's like this dual level. And, there is a truth there that in order to start at the bottom of a new country, a new culture where you don't know the language, you do have to go above and beyond for other people to take you seriously, for you to
Uh-huh.
be able to survive, right? And so there are periods of your life where you kind of have to tap into this hustle mindset. What's happened though is that it's just become the norm. And like for me, like I didn't really know any other way of living besides always being the best at what I was doing. Now, I'm not a perfectionist, right? There's a distinction there, but there was this like unreasonable standard that I was trying to meet. And it just kind of gets baked into your DNA. It gets baked into like your worldview, your values, all of those things. And you start seeing rest as something that is lazy. There's like a moralistic judgment there. You start seeing rest as something you don't deserve,
Hmm.
right? You often might start believing that other people deserve rest. People who have generational wealth, they're the only people who can rest, right? I can't do it. It's not like so I'm not deserving of it. And that makes you feel guilty if you're resting.
Yeah.
Or you think about how difficult or different your parents' experience was, and you carry that sense of like obligation, a sense of return, and you don't rest. And so it just kind of gets baked into your life in such a subtle and insidious way that you can't really identify it. You can't really
Mm.
stop and say, oh, this is not healthy.
Yeah. I think about, especially the women in my family, wear this busyness almost like as a badge of honor oftentimes. And I definitely got very clear messaging about rest being lazy. Like, after a certain time of day, if you're sleeping, it's a problem. I still, at the age of 40, have a hard time napping because so much of that is just like ingrained in you that rest equals laziness, and that, you have to make the most of every minute. And so, what is the kind of emotional payoff when we are wearing that busyness as a badge of honor? Like, how does this actually manifest?
That's an interesting question, right? Because there are unresolved emotions that drive it, that drive you towards it. And then there is an emotional payoff that we're all seeking through the mechanism of chronic busyness. So on the outside, like on the one end, chronic busyness is often driven by shame, fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, fear of not being good enough, of losing an opportunity, right? um, Perfectionism, and a harsh inner critic, like constantly in our minds. There's like a voice that's constantly going. So that leads you to chronic busyness, which is overcommitting, saying yes to everything, taking on more than you can tolerate or handle, believing that nobody else can do it the right way, only you can do it the right way, so you are the one who has to do it. And then on the other end, when you are chronically busy, the thing that we're all chasing is validation and belonging. If I'm the crux of logistics of my family will always need me, and therefore I'm valued, I'm loved. And this message gets stuck very early on. If you do really well in school, your parents might reward you a little bit more than your siblings, or you might kind of become the favorite child, or you might hear them talk about you to their friends, right? And so then this connection between achievement and belonging starts there. And so that's what happens. We're seeking this external validation, a sense of belonging, but it's not a sustainable way of achieving it. So while we do get it, it's short lived, it comes in spurts, and then we burn out. But like the hit is so strong that you do it all over again. If you are not aware, if you are not intentional, if you are not actually making choices that are aligned with your values. And people can live their whole lives like this, you know?
Yeah.
And you hear it a lot, you hear it especially in women. There is this like sense of almost like a victimized regret often at the end of their lives when their children have gone off and they're making their own choices and their male partner has passed on, right? They're often left contending with, who did I do this all for?
Yeah.
Because there's no skill for internal validation that was built throughout the lifetime.
Mm. Oh man, I have a feeling this conversation is going to trigger a lot of people that are listening. They either are this person or they know this person. But it's important that we know, what's going on so we can start to break these cycles. Let's talk more about the difference between productivity in a like healthy way versus toxic productivity. What are some of those red flags that can make you realize like where the warning signs might begin?
Toxic productivity, one of the biggest red flags is you are not allowing yourself to rest. So that means your sleep is poor. That means you skip meals because you're doing stuff, right? You are skipping social rest. So you might skip people's birthdays because you're working late, or you might overcommit yourself because you're wanting to do so much and be there for other people that you only show up 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes to like three different events on one Friday, but you're not present, right? So you're not actually getting that social rest. So rest is not a part of toxic productivity, and that's what makes your productivity unhealthy. Another hallmark of toxic productivity is feeling like just like constantly on the edge of overwhelm. Like because you're trying to resolve these difficult emotions through busyness, like shame and guilt and fear, but you're not actually resolving them, right? You're just distracting yourself. So they're bubbling under the surface. So you're just on edge. You're quick to kind of get irritated with people, your family, strangers on the subway, things like that. And feeling like you are out of control. So you look at your calendar and you're like, wait, I have this today, forgetting that you had that today. Like you're not actually in intentional control of your time. You're on the receiving end of your calendar because you're just unintentionally putting things on there. That's when your productivity is unhealthy. And one of the biggest ones is that it's not value aligned. So you're often operating from a place of resentment, whether it's obligation, whether it's self-imposed shoulds, like I should bake cupcakes from scratch for my child's like school thing. Like I should do it. Like I should be the one who is doing XYZ thing. It's like this should that you're trapped by. So you're operating from a sense of resentment because the things that you're actually saying yes to are not aligned with your values. So on the flip side, healthy productivity is it makes space for rest. It's very clear about the value, right? So you're able to say yes and no distinctively. You're able to kind of allocate time in your calendar in a way that it seems reasonable. So you are not like, you don't look at your calendar and you're like mad about it, right? So that's kind of what healthy productivity is. And healthy productivity actually, in the long run, keeps you more productive. If we operate from a place of, toxic productivity, over time, quality of work decreases.
Mhm.
Think about it. A 45-minute meeting can get more done sometimes versus like a 60-minute, because people like lollygag for 15 because they're like, oh, we have an hour. But you
Yeah.
can compress things and make yourself more efficient. And when you are coming from a place of empowerment and intention, you don't go into a place of disconnection. So you could be doing the thing you love, but if you're doing it in like a toxically productive way, you become disconnected from it. You
Yeah.
don't want to do the podcast. You don't want to
Mm.
write. You don't want to show up to work. Like the things you
Mhm.
used to care about, you stop caring.
Yeah. Man, yeah, I think a lot of folks can identify areas in their life where they might have that sense of like a lack of balance when it comes to the achievements and all that stuff and the impact that it's having on their overall life. And I think about myself where I for a very long time used work as a coping mechanism to avoid like addressing other issues outside of that, because it felt like that's the thing I can control. But let's say, in a marriage with someone who is not, in an unproductive marriage, it's like I can't fix that myself. So I'm going to just double down on my business or my projects or my career. How much of toxic productivity do you think can also be tied into using work as like a coping mechanism for avoidance?
All of it. You're
Yeah.
trying to avoid difficult emotions, like the underlying mechanism is I have these unresolved emotions. How can I solve for them? Right? You got to solve for them by distracting yourself with busyness or try to solve for them to get something out of what like if you feel, let's say, abandoned or rejected in your relationship, you might go hard on getting external achievements, right? And the thing with coping mechanisms is that they're good. Like we're supposed to have them. They're just not supposed to be long lasting.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what makes a coping mechanism what we call maladaptive. So
Okay.
any coping mechanism can be adaptive for as long as it is temporary. But
Mm-hmm.
what's happened is our culture also really glorifies chronic busyness. So we don't actually see it as a coping mechanism. We just see it as a reality. We see
Mm-hmm.
it as a way of living. We see it as the modern condition. We see it as the way to get success as it is defined by our society. So if you're like having a rough patch in your marriage and you kind of go really deep into work, that's actually protective if you do it for like 6 months. If you do it for 4 years, your emotions are going to find a way to come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So let's say you find yourself in a position where now you realize you've been on this toxic productivity train, you want to get off, but there is potential greater impact than just yourself by making that decision. Let's talk to folks who listen to the show who are providing, let's say, financial support to family members, which is a very common thing. Some of them might feel the pressure to continue achieving, making more money because it's not only about me, it's about I have to support all these people and meet all these expectations. How do you start to take back some of those, expectations so that you can start resting and not feeling like you're killing yourself for, something that is honestly not your fault that you have to deal with, but you have this great sense of just like guilt and responsibility that it is your issue to resolve.
Yeah, I mean that's so real, right? And it feels like an impossible situation to get out of. Now everyone's situation is difficult, like different and difficult in their own way. So the idea of saying to somebody, well, just stop doing it is not very helpful, right? There might be people who struggle with this concept of financial obligation and still like are not motivated to stop that, right? They
Mhm.
want to help even though it feels bad.
Yeah.
So what I say to people is trying to make a big change is will almost always backfire. So what can we do in your life that can make things a little more pleasant, a little easier, or how can we add things that can make your life more robust so that you have the resilience to withstand the discomfort of this obligation that you have, right?
Mhm.
And I think that is really important because, yes, sometimes people have financial obligation to family. Sometimes, like, I mean, bills are real all the time. So you have to work, even if you
Yeah.
might be in a toxic work environment, right? And I think we've all been there and it's so harmful to your mental health. So, how do you cope with in that time? And from this perspective, where you have this pressure to achieve, what I always say to people is find an avenue of creativity. Creativity is a hugely underrated coping skill. And
Hmm.
it's lost right now because we can scroll and access a bazillion things immediately. And so most people are coping by doom scrolling. But really kind of not, and I mean, I do it too. My like phone usage is embarrassingly high because like the world is hard right now, right?
Yeah.
But what I try to say is to make time at least once every 2 weeks. If you're a parent, you have elderly, parents yourself you're caring for, or whatever, you have a dependent of some kind, you can't do once a week. I understand that, right? Many people are working multiple jobs. You can't do once a week. But have something at least every other week that A, you look forward to, B, has some creative component to it, and C, is in service of your own joy.
Mm.
Doesn't even have to be an hour. It can be half an hour. It doesn't need to be somewhere outside your house. It can be in your house, right? It could be you learning how to do needlepoint on YouTube. It can be something so simple. It could be joining an improv class so you can meet new people and like get disconnected from like the pressures of your life. But creativity allows you to decompress. Creativity keeps your mind engaged enough so that you can process difficult emotions, but still distracts you enough from the difficult emotion for you to take a break from it, right?
Mhm.
I don't always recommend people journal because journaling gets you back into the emotion. What we're trying to do is to get you away from that, right? So that's the first thing. That's the first step. Diversify your life a little bit, make it a little bit more robust outside of the obligation you have.
Mhm.
Once you have that in your habit, like you have 3, 6 months of doing this regularly for yourself, it gives you enough emotional resilience to then analyze which obligation can you change? How much can you adjust? What can you take away? What can you remove? What can you reduce? Can you have a conversation with your sibling to split something, right? You can't just do that immediately when you're already overwhelmed because you're like in your head with your emotions.
Yeah.
So it's that you have to build up your resilience through creativity first, and then you can do an audit and an analysis. And then you can think about boundary setting and things
Mhm.
like that because you'll
Yeah.
just have more resilience.
I love that perspective, and I think about my own kind of things that I participate in that bring me joy, and one of them is taking Zumba classes. So like, there's something very grounding about taking dance classes. Like, you're forced to pay attention, you're forced to interact with your body, you're not thinking about all the that's things that are going on in the world. And for those 60 minutes, like, it's my time. Everything else can wait. And so I think that is such an important thing for folks to incorporate into their life, especially if you're someone who always has this sense of like, I need to do things because of X accolade, recognition, validation. It is okay to be a whole human and do things for the simple fact that they make you happy, not because it makes you money or because anybody thinks like it's a fabulous thing that you're doing.
Yeah. Oh my God. Honestly, I think one of the worst things that's happened to us as a society in the last 5 years is that everyone has started to monetize their hobbies.
Everything.
It's not like I understand the need for a side hustle as well, but there are some things that should remain sacred. And I don't mean sacred in like a religious perspective. I mean like sacred in like its intentionality, its purpose, and its place in your life.
Hmm.
Monetization of hobbies is just so tragic. And if you need to make a side hustle, you should absolutely do it and then find something else that you can take for yourself, even if it's 20 minutes every other week.
Absolutely. Speaking of, kind of this pressure to look like you have it all together, and doom scrolling and all these things, how much do you think that social media is playing into people feeling like they need to be toxically productive because of the comparison trap that inevitably you get caught up in on social media?
Yeah, so toxic productivity, I think, if you kind of look back at like work culture shift, I feel like it kind of like the 80s was the pivot with advent of email and internet, right? So I think like that's really where it began, like with the Blackberries, where people could do their work emails wherever. And it was like a status symbol. People
Yeah.
wore their Blackberries and pagers on their belts because they like wanted the world to know. So I feel like it kind of started a while ago. But with social media blurring the line between our lives and the internet has amplified every negative thing. I
Uh,
think like it was built as this like beautiful avenue of information, and like the internet was going to be this information superhighway, and we were all going to become more enlightened, evolved people. But unfortunately, like the opposite has happened, which is very disappointing,
yeah.
in that we've devolved, we're more divided. Like it's just like a whole mess. And so social media has amplified every negative thing. It has amplified the data points you can compare yourself to, right? 40 years ago, when my parents were living in the Middle East and their parents were in Pakistan, for them to get information about what was going on there, like there was a delay. There was like a
Yeah.
2-day delay. You had to go somewhere to make the international phone call or whatever. Now something happens to my friend in Australia and like I know immediately, like
Uh-huh.
in that moment. And so while that's a good thing, it just increased the data points. And our mind has not evolved as fast as our technology has. So we don't have the like actual neural capacity to tolerate the number of data points that we are processing. And so that's why we're all overstimulated, right? And when you're overstimulated, you turn to do numbing activities, whether that's alcohol, drugs, food, shopping. But most of all, right now, it's doom scrolling. It's just that mindless because you just want to numb out. So I think like I mean, we talked about it like 10 years ago about regulating social media and people were kind of against it because of like freedom of speech and whatever. And now we're kind of seeing the negative impact of it. But that being said, I think that we still have the ability to leverage features on social media to help ourselves if they are not going to help us, right? If
Mhm.
they're building to grab our attention and our eyeballs, they have also built in features that we can use to help ourselves. So there's a time limit on every app. You can hard code your phone to turn off all social apps at 10 or 11 p.m. You can grayscale your phone. And I
What's
don't
that
know
mean?
if so you might not be able to see it, but like the iPhone, you can like essentially code it so that it becomes gray. Like this is a totally black and white, right? And so it's really hard to use.
Mm.
You know, if you try to go on Instagram and it's grayscaled, it's not pleasant because the colors is what attracts our brain. So once you do that, you're less likely to pick up your phone. So there's ways to kind of like mitigate that. And then people are often like, oh, I don't have choice in this. It's just everywhere. The ads are everywhere. Mute accounts, unfollow people, right? Like do that and clear your follower list. And you don't have to engage with rage bait. You don't have to do that. Don't have to correct people on the internet. You don't have to say, what about me? What about me? Like, what about this very specific lived experience that I have? Like, why are you not talking about it? You don't have to do that. You can read the newspaper on your desktop once in the morning. So, like, there's the agency that we have in this matter. And the reason I say it is because, you know, we always think that we don't have choice, but we do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that perspective, and I have a grayscale on my phone right now. It makes so much sense. Like the overstimulation definitely comes from just everything coming at you. So you have to kind of play tricks on your brain to make it not so dependent on these things. They're constantly seeking your attention. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Say one thing to that point. I think that a lot of us struggle with feeling that we are dependent on our phones because there is like a moral judgment to it. It's almost like people think it's a willpower thing. And so the more you believe that, the more shame you feel when you look at your usage. And then it's kind of like binge eating. You're like, oh, it's the same framework, right? It's like, oh, like I already spent 2 hours today, whatever. I'm a failure at like boundaries with phone. Let me just do more. Like that's what happens. But the truth is that the apps are built to map our brain's neural structure. So you don't have a moral failing if your app usage is 5 hours a day. It's designed for that. Every
Mm,
single feature is intentional to keep you on there. Everything,
mhm.
right? Everything is there to overstimulate you. So I want people to know this, to feel empowered to make the change and not feel like shamed that they're just not having the willpower. It's not a willpower thing at all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for that context. Okay, let's talk to the folks who have hung their hat on their toxic productivity. Like they, still believe like that is why I've been able to achieve everything I've been able to achieve. Like there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. But secretly they're burnt out. They might not even know they're burnt out. Like how do we start to separate our inherent value as a human being from our achievements, from our career, from all of the external success factors?
I think that that is like a question that a lot of people struggle with. That's actually one of the most common things I get when I'm talking to people in the real world, like at parties or whatever. Somebody might ask me, they'll be like, well, that was the only reason I was able to get 2 degrees. And that was the only reason I was able to get a house and whatever. And all that is true. All that is true. Like the ask of the book is not to put down productivity. right? The ask is not to become anti productive. There are other really phenomenal books on that, one being How to Do Nothing. That is like an anti productivity book. And if that's something that you're interested in, like it's a phenomenal book. This book is about inviting healthy habits into your productivity. So when someone says that to me, I say to them, well, how many more times could you do it again? Like, what is your blood work like? What's your stress level like? How happy is your marriage? How much do you see your children? Right? Like, if you have kids, if you are married, like, when was the last time you hung out with your friend just casually, just spontaneously? I think there are more questions we can ask ourselves to invite us to think about our life outside of achievements. And so, one of the things I mentioned in the book is this audit, right? I think we have to get in the habit of auditing ourselves. And while you can make like a list of achievements that are, whatever you've done, think about if it's reflective of all of the domains of your life. And like get into the habit of reflecting on your choices and where you're putting your time and things like that. So that's what I would say to people who do say that is I'm not saying that you need to stop being productive. I want you to think about if there's a healthier way for you to get to where you want and to also understand are the things that you were chasing the things that you really wanted. That's like a big exploration, and we believe in this like sunk cost. Oh, I've already been a doctor for 40 years, so I can't do anything else. But did you ever want to perform? Like, is that the thing you loved in school? Like, were you in drama? Maybe you could just do improv for fun, right? Like, I think like that's the thing. Like, the productivity becomes so much about achievement, but can you be productive about your joy? Can you
Mm,
take that mindset to your happiness and your relationships? That's
yeah.
a tough one because of our world.
It is, and I think about conversations that I've had with moms, for example, about this idea that, like, there's no village anymore because everybody's too tired or they're still working or, it's hard to make friends because people don't wanna take the time to go and, curate relationships, and I have to believe that this society that we have built where toxic productivity is rewarded is what's also making people, like, very lonely and very isolated because they're just so freaking depleted. It's like, I don't have energy for anything else.
Yeah, you're totally correct. I don't have time. Even if I had the energy, it's so stacked. I'm so overcommitted. I have to do so many things. Like I don't have time to listen to you talk about like X, Y, Z thing, right? And that's like a vicious like loop that we get trapped in. The more tired you are, the less you show up for people, the more it isolates you, the more you do stuff for connection, the more tired you become. Like it's like this like loop we get stuck in. And I think that one of the things that we can do as part of the audit that I just mentioned, and I do this with clients when we are working on this stuff, is we list down all of the obligations and then we make like a column and you kind of write down, how did I feel before doing this? How did I feel after doing this? That's another column. And then another column that says like, did I have to do this? And then you analyze it. And then you see that oftentimes you are resentful going in, you are resentful coming out. And then you're like, wait, I actually didn't have to do this. This was like a
Yeah.
voluntary thing, right? And so what you can do is you can kind of whittle it down to like four things that you want to commit to that opens up time for community and connection. I
Mm,
think the popular phrase that's going around right now is everybody wants a village, nobody wants to be a villager. I don't know if you've
yeah,
heard that one.
I had definitely have.
Yeah, and I have been writing a lot about the inconvenience of community on Substack because
Mm,
a little bit of like a sideline from the book, but it's something I think about a lot. Something I hear a lot with my clients, with my friends, and even myself. You
yeah.
know, if my neighbor wants to drop in for like a coffee in the morning, that's like inconvenient, right? That happened yesterday. But then I was like, you know what? No, I want to sit with him. Yeah, it's like 40 minutes and I could have like slept in like 30 more minutes, but it was so fun. We had like a morning coffee together, had a little bit like granola and yogurt, and then he went off to work and I went off to work and it was all before 9 a.m. It was inconvenient, but the payoff of connection was so powerful. And
Mm,
that's what we need to remember because we think we're getting connection here. We're like, oh, I'm going to get connection. I'm going to send a voice note. Like, I'll see what their baby's photo is like. And so we think that it can be convenient to get connection, but we have to remember that the inconvenient connection actually feels better.
Mm, yeah. I have hope that the more people that listen to this message, the more we can start to change how we think about all of that. I'm curious for you, right? So you have now based your entire work on productivity. How do you avoid yourself getting back into the toxic productivity cycle? Like, what are your habits? And how do you kind of police yourself when you might find yourself on the edge of that?
Yeah, so super, super important question because all of us can slip into it. I mean, you have this like creative business. I'm sure you're like, some days you're like, what? Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So, so one of the things I want to highlight is that there will be seasons of life where toxic productivity is required. Like, there's
Mm,
no way out. You've just had a baby. Like, you're not going to like, not be there for your baby. It's like
right.
totally fine. Like, or you have a sprint at work. When my book was coming out last year, like, my goodness, like the 5 weeks before, I was like the poster child for toxic productivity. But I told myself that 2 weeks after the book comes out, I'm not doing anything. I'm not taking anything. I'm not doing a book tour right after because I was already so depleted. I
Yeah.
wasn't about to go on a 2 week cross country, 14 flight situation, right? And so that's an important piece. Identifying an end time to your toxic productivity sprint. If you're in a season of life that requires it, that's super important. And you tell yourself that and you create a boundary and you respect that boundary. That's one thing. The other thing is I do the audit. I look at my calendar overall, and before I commit to something, I make sure I see what's before and after, and I offer an alternative. I have said no to many opportunities that were really good, but I just knew that I couldn't fit it in. I would be resentful after. Like, you have to do that cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
That's one thing I do. And I also really, over the last year and a half, oh my gosh, it's October, so almost 2 years, um, really have made time for my like creative hobbies, for fun, just being purely mediocre at them. You should see my needlepoint work. Most of it is inside out because I can't figure it out. Nobody sees it. It's never put on Instagram. Puzzles, improv, like that kind of stuff. And I really prioritized my community last year. Like,
Mm.
I really, like, I made myself inconvenient. Like, I did the hosting. I brought people out. Like, I was like, "Hey, I'm going grocery shopping. You want to go for a walk with me? I'll come see your baby for 20 minutes. Like, I'll just drop in and leave." Like, I really, really did that. And it actually changed how I feel about my life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. I love, when we get really intentional about what we're doing with our time, we can realize oftentimes many of those obligations that we feel are obligations are really just like self-imposed, things that we can be a lot more intentional about. Um,
I was actually
yeah.
curious about you. What about this kind of caught your eye and you felt like, hey, this message resonates with me? And then
Oh, man.
what do you do? Like,
This is a great question. So I'm thinking of some toxically productive things I've done in the past couple of years. The worst was probably going on a book tour in my first trimester, 15 different cities, bunch of flights. I would literally like get off the plane, get to the hotel, face plant on the bed, wake up an hour before the event, go to the thing, come back, get to the airport. And it was like, I look back and I'm just like, what the hell were you thinking? And so it's just, I knew in that season, fine, like we're gonna have to sacrifice. But I did also say, after this book tour is done, I'm off for like the remainder of the year. I'm gonna be focused on just like growing this child and taking care of my mental health. So I think I've gotten better at giving myself space to rest. So one of the things I do in my business, I always take every December off. So we're not doing anything, like that's the end of the year. Don't expect me to work, like don't call me, I'll call you. And I really like to encourage, especially entrepreneurs, which are a big part of our listenership. It's very easy to get into the toxic productivity cycle when you are your own boss and you're responsible for everything. But I have found that the more that I say no, the more I have the space and capacity and energy to really work on the things that I'm excited about, give my best to those projects. And actually, I've made more money doing that than like saying yes to all the things. So there is something to be said about, just really being intentional with your time and productivity.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. And I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. All right. So there's a lot of folks who are parents that listen to the show and they want to break all types of cycles, right? We're talking about generational poverty, all these things. But many are also interested in breaking the cycle of shaming things like rest, of not modeling toxic productivity to their children. What can we do as parents to make sure that our kids don't feel that same pressure that we might have grown up with, and don't repeat those cycles of feeling like, burnout is the badge?
Yeah. You have to show your kids instead of tell them. So you have to have an environment in your home where they see you resting, but like
Hmm.
actively resting, not passively resting, you know? So they see that there's like choices that we can make that will nourish us. So I think that's really important that you have to show them. And so there's this whole concept of like sleep supportive families that's floating around on the internet. Have you heard of it?
I haven't.
So there's essentially a sleep supportive family is families where if you sleep in on the weekend or you sleep late, they don't make snide comments or little like pokey comments. But if you come from an immigrant family, your aunt and your mom, like they'll just make like a passing like poke,
Yeah.
oh yeah, oh she sleeps till 12 or whatever. So
Hmm.
that's a sleep unsupportive family. And it's not a mean thing. It's not like a horrible thing that you need to call child support for, child protection for. It's just a culture in the family. But I
Yeah.
grew up in a sleep non-supportive family. Like you're
Same.
up and you're going. So now when I'm on vacation, I'm like 6 a.m. Where are we going? Like, and so I can't rest. So you have to actually show your kids that. So by
Mm.
being sleep supportive, by letting yourself rest, taking naps, like letting them see that you are also a creative person, that you do things outside of your work. I think you just have to model the things you want your kid to have. Like that's the
Mhm.
most important thing. And the second thing is we are in a culture where parents are feeling the burn of toxic productivity as parents.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to get my kid in like four different extracurriculars so that they can get into like lower kindergarten. And the kid is like two. It doesn't even know how to walk, right? And so that we have to curb ourselves. We
Yeah.
have to practice emotional regulation as parents, identify what are the two things my kid actually likes. Are they interested in building? Do I put them in shop class? Like, don't force them into things that they're not naturally inclined towards, and limit the number so they can go deeper into it instead of broadly, like vaguely good at like seven different things. So
Uh-huh.
having your own boundaries and limits and not falling into, well, their kid is doing this and that they started walking early and they can speak four languages, right? Like we can get in our heads. So having those boundaries as parents, super important, and really work on having like tech free zones in the home. If you hear about it, all of like the tech moguls, their kids don't get screen time.
Go
This
figure.
is documented. This is research. The journalists have written about this. Like all of the Zuckerbergs of the world, CEOs of tech companies, their kids don't get screen time. So you can't just take phone away from kids and then be sitting and scrolling, right? Like you have to create a world in your home
Mhm.
where kids see that there's more outside the phone. And
Yeah.
it's very hard. Like I don't have kids, so I'm like la la la, like do all these things. These are all, options. You have to pick the thing that works for your family, adjust it. If you can't have a digital free home, maybe have like Friday nights digital free, right?
Mhm.
Saturday mornings, like do one moment. Do puzzles with your children on the kitchen table, like throughout the week. Have a Scrabble game going throughout the week that they can just walk in and, do little competitions on crosswords with your kids when they're old enough. Like just show them that there's more to the world. I think
Yeah.
that yeah.
I mean, I think it's so important because when I think about why most parents give their kids the screen, it's because they're freaking exhausted. They want a break. They haven't structured their life to actually get the rest. And so the kids are actually the ones that are paying the price for your exhaustion. Right. So it's almost just like address what's going on here so that you don't feel like, oh my God, I got to spend 2 hours with my kids.
Yeah.
uh, do what you need to do to your own schedule, to your own life, so that it's not yet another thing that depletes you and actually something that fills your cup up.
expectation is real, right? Like if
Yeah,
you're
for
someone
sure.
who works like 9 to 6 and it's a very people facing job, you come home and your preteen wants to talk to you about the Jonas Brothers, like on 10x speed. Like, yeah, you're gonna be like, I don't care about Joe Jonas, like, But the thing is, you're right in that we have to find pockets of rest and we have to find small ways to do it. You don't need an hour to rest. You could do a 3-minute meditation, and that has an impact on your body, right? You could do a little bit of doodling right before you actually go. Like you can mentally prep yourself to being with your family by resting. And also, like, don't be unreasonable. You're not going to be your best every single day,
Mhm.
right? So just kind of like give yourself, like, you know what, my weekends are going to be the time for this, or 3 nights a week, I'm going to do that. Like, have limits on how much you can show up.
Yeah.
Um, and don't really fall into the super toxic, you have to do everything yourself as a parent. Like, you'll eat chips, it will be fine. Like, nothing's gonna happen. You don't have to like peel the potatoes and fry the chips yourself every single day, right? Like, it's okay. Like, give yourself a
Pick your
break.
battle.
Yeah, there's a lot on the internet right now where they're like, make your own butter and like curdle your own yogurt and like,
You know what? You're gonna not only are you gonna spend, like, twice the amount of money on, like, raw ingredients, but also, like, there's other things you could probably do with your time would be more productive.
unless you're making an activity out of it with your kid. Like if you and
Fair.
your kid are making the goat cheese together on the kitchen counter, you're chatting, amazing. But you
Yeah.
don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to like make fresh mozzarella, right? And but people are feeling that pressure. They're feeling that pressure right now. Parents are feeling it. It's
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I think this book is going to really have folks thinking about a lot of different areas in their lives where they can start to optimize. But if people were to take away one thing or make one shift from reading your book, what would you hope that that is?
one big shift that I think we can make as a small ask, but it's a big shift, is to essentially edit your calendar. So I call this the Chanel rule, which Coco Chanel said, take off one piece of accessory before you go out because we tend to overdo it.
Hmm.
We do that with our calendars. So be kind of like a ruthless editor on your calendar. Review all of your work meetings. Like, do you have to be there? Can you read the recap email? And like, are you a decision maker on that call? If you're not, like, maybe you don't need to be there and have that conversation, right? Free up some of that space. Free up your evenings. Like, take one thing out. So, like, get in the habit of editing your calendar and commit to removing one thing. If you can't do it per week, per month, and then kind of build from there.
Mhm. I love that. Isra, this has been an amazing conversation. I know people are going to want to find out more about you, the work that you do, get a copy of your book, all that and more. So tell us where we can find you and, what we have to look forward to as far as content that's coming out from your side.
So everything related to my book, my work, digital resources, workbooks, things like that are available on my website, which is my full name, israhnasir.com. And in the pipeline is really like I'm digging deeper on Substack and going deeper into many of the things that we talked about, like community and culture, identity, because Instagram is like so short in terms of attention. You can't really share the nuances of something that's
Yeah.
so big as emotional growth, right? And so I've really like gone into Substack to share resources, exercises, references, reading recommendations, things like that, as well as sharing my own insights as a therapist. So
Mhm.
if you're interested in more of this kind of stuff and you like long form reading, I would definitely recommend myself.
Amazing. We'll have all of those resources linked in the episode show notes. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who could also use some of this advice. Isra, once again, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And everyone, until next time, stay poderosa. Thank you.